Hello, friend, and welcome to Sturdy Girl, a podcast focused on strength, not size, where you'll hear conversations around healthy body image, cultivating confidence, and being a resilient human in both body and mind. Sturdy Girl is the podcast where we shift the focus away from your appearance and on to living the big, rad life you deserve. Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 27 of Sturdy Girl. We are in the last episode of season 2. Megan and I are post-work recording for the millionth time, and I don't know that, our listeners get our best selves recording after work? There's less of a filter.
Yeah.
I told Megan before we hit record that my goal for this episode is to see how few times I can say the word kind of, because I noticed myself today with patience explaining things and saying kind of. This is kind of blah, blah, blah. And then realizing, no, it was just blah, blah, blah. There was no kind of about it. So that's the goal.
And don't edit them out.
I won't. We'll count at the end.
That'll be the task for the listeners.
Yes. Count how many times Jess says kind of, but don't count how many times we say like, because
that's not fair.
It's just out of control. Okay, so we are going to talk about getting out of a funk. And I wanted to insert music in here, like Funky Town, because you couldn't pay me to sing.
No.
But it would be really funny too, but we'd have to buy the rights.
No, I'm not going to come out there and surprise anyone with a good singing voice. It's just not going to happen.
No, but let's talk about funks. Let's talk about being funky.
About being funky.
Yes. I guess note before we get started, as we dispense advice, we're not therapists. Just your friendly reminder. This isn't therapy. We're not giving therapeutic advice. These are things that have worked for both Megan and I in these seasons that we all go through. If you are feeling like you have a lot of these funks pretty consistently for long periods of time, negative mood for long periods of time, please talk to someone. Please talk to a therapist. We care about you.
Therapy's great.
Agreed. Every
Highly
week.
suggest.
Yes. This is why we are mostly whole and healthy, fairly sane humans.
I know.
Most of the time.
Should have seen Megan 10 years ago.
I did. But a funk, everyone knows what a funk is. It's when you're in a rut, when you feel stuck and you're unable to get back into things, into your routine. Maybe certain things that used to bring you joy aren't bringing you joy in this season, and you don't feel like yourself. That's how I associate a funk, is just like, I'm not feeling like myself.
Yeah.
Things aren't flowing the way they normally do. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times for me, I can really call it out, because I also feel highly agitated when I'm in a funk.
Yeah, or you notice yourself like, oh, wait, why did that actually upset me?
Yeah.
What?
Why am I so bothered?
I'm not PMS, so what is this?
Yeah, that's a whole other story.
Exactly. But okay, we have a few tips to help you with a funk. Again, not therapy. These are things that have helped us.
On top of therapy.
On top of therapy, yes.
Yeah. 5
tips. The first one being write it out. So we've talked about journaling. If you look on any person's Instagram page and you see about how important journaling is and writing out all your thoughts and brain dumping, and it can sound really frustrating because you're just like, what the hell? Does it work? I don't know. This is more of, for me personally, it's the first step in acknowledging, oh crap, I am 100% in a funk right now. How am I feeling? It's a way for me to kind of check in with myself. Kind of number 1. It is a way for me to check in with myself, to say, how am I doing? How am I feeling? What do I need? And whether that's writing it out in my blank unlined moleskin notebook with my favorite pen, or it's the notes app, or it's a voice memo, it's getting it out of my head and into the world. And sometimes then you realize, oh, this is what caused it, or this is how I'm feeling. I wasn't sure because those feelings were actually coming out as agitation or frustration or anger or whatever it is. And it helps to also give yourself a little bit of grace too. I guess I should say, give myself grace to understand that it's okay to feel your feels. And it's also a piece of self-compassion too.
I am one of those people that would love to be able to get into journaling. I can relate to it in a certain way where I don't necessarily brain dump or journal about my feelings, but sometimes when I'm feeling a certain way or about how I've interacted with a person, or if I want to say something to them and I don't know how to formulate that, a lot of times I'll actually just write it down in my notes app and then sit on it and then come back to it and be like, do I sound like I'm really angry? Is this mainly just being emotional?
Working through it.
And then kind of filtering it down until I figure out a response that I want. want and then be like, okay, this is how I'm approaching the situation.
But it's
Yeah.
giving you perspective.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the point of this, of writing it out, is it allows you to get it out of your head in whether it's written, typed, spoken, whatever, and see it a little bit more objectively and give yourself that position of being a little more self-compassionate. And that's the whole point of this, is saying, for me, with athletes that I work with, when I talk about journaling prompts, those are usually the ones that I say, of checking in with yourself.
Yeah.
How am I doing? How am I feeling? What do I need? What's going on in my world that might be contributing to things? And using those. And I usually say, don't care about spelling, don't care about grammar.
Yeah.
Set a timer for 10 minutes and just let it all out. And there's no structure with it that's that taking a step back, getting it out of your head. And sometimes that's all you need. One thing I wanted to tell a story, I suppose, about self-compassion. We talk about being kind to yourself on this podcast all the time. We talk about self-talk and how important it is. And that self-compassion piece of kindness is one main pillar of self-compassion. And I was running last weekend, and it's my first double-digit run in a while. And this training plan, because I'm running the Maui Half Marathon in less than 2 weeks, has been less than stellar.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of trepidation going into this run. And so I'm running and start noticing how I'm talking to myself to keep going. And I'm all up in my head, like, come on, Jess, don't be a little bitch. Keep going. What are you doing? You know, and noticing, calling myself a bitch, noticing myself saying, suck it up, keep going, and recognizing the both and, I guess is my point in this, of it made me laugh later to realize what I was saying to myself and how that's what kept me going, because I believed that I was capable. And so that self-belief came forward as like, don't be a pansy. Don't stop right now. You can keep going. Throw that self-doubt out. You've got this.
Yeah.
And so that came in the form of, don't be a little bitch.
Which sometimes we just have to talk to ourselves that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So tip number 1, write it out, or, you know, say mean things to keep yourself going. I don't know.
I wouldn't say that. I say it's a different type of encouragement.
Tough love. I mean, I remember when I was doing tennis lessons over a decade ago. It was when we were at PCC. And that was how I responded better, when people would be like, oh yeah, good job, keep going. And I'm like, nope, that doesn't motivate me. You gotta tell me to suck it up. Tell me something mean.
Can you yell at me a little bit?
Yeah, be angrier when you yell at me.
I'm like the opposite. I'm like, please be gentle.
Gentle, be kind. Isn't that wild how we respond to different things that help keep us going, though?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess there would be times when I was like definitely like riding longer distances where I was just like, you're fine. Suck it up. Your legs, like, you can realistically just keep going. It's fine.
Yeah. It comes back to believing in yourself and knowing that you're capable. That self-efficacy.
Yep.
That's my self-efficacy voice.
That's what we'll call it.
Okay. So next tip is to call a friend. I feel like Carly Rae Jepsen's playing in the background, like, call me maybe. And the whole point of this is, don't isolate yourself. When I find myself getting into funks, I tend to, I wouldn't go so far as to say isolate myself, but I don't reach out to my people as much, because I'm like, I don't really know what's wrong, and I just feel kind of weird, and like, am I just going to call them and complain? I'm not really sure about this, but the point is, make sure that you're spending your time around people, because maybe that will help you to find those little happy moments. Maybe that helps you to come out of the funk when you remember, oh, I really like doing this thing with this friend.
I feel like that way too. If you're in kind of like I say depressive state very loosely, but like I've one person that's kind of struggled with ups and downs. Yeah. And you do, when you start to isolate yourself, it just creates, like, I work from home too. And so when I isolate myself, it is isolating myself.
Yeah.
It is myself, my dogs, my husband, and like nothing else, which is not good, because then you're also putting a lot of strain on your partner. You're putting a lot of strain on yourself. And so I feel like, especially in an era where so many of us work remote, that really important.
Being around people is that much more important. I know that was one thing when the pandemic restrictions lifted. Blake he's such an ideas guy, and I love that about him, but he was pushing me for a while to write a book about the secret to small talk, because so many people, after being so isolated for years at that point, didn't remember how to carry on a conversation with people. And so he's like, you've been working full time and half your job is talking to people. You know how to do this. Teach people how to talk and have a conversation again. And it just shows you that interaction is so important.
When I'm in a funk, I feel like it's also about understanding people's feedback too. from me. I know when I get in those like mindsets, I can be really negative and I can be really just kind of shit on everything for better or,
And when you feel shitty about yourself, it's easy to take it
Yeah.
out on other people or let that like negativity come out as well.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like I feel like there was a pretty good phase where it just kind of, I think I was unhappy at my job, which really triggered the beginning of it. This was a few years ago, and there's a lot of stress at work. And then I kind of had confrontations happening in my social circle, and I would bring that home and just kind of be a bitch. Like, you know, if that's the best way I can describe
And
it.
inadvertently, because you had all these internal
I
things
didn't
going on, all
know-
these other situations.
I didn't realize I was doing it, but I did feel the negativity in myself. But it was also being able to take someone's feedback on me at the time as Brandon and just being like, hey, you're treating me this way. You're treating other people this way. Where's that coming from? And kind of taking like, I think that it also takes some self-reflection because you have to be able to look at like, hear that and not immediately get defensive.
So that goes back to where we talked about writing it out.
Yeah.
That's more just that acknowledgement and that's that awareness around trying to locate where the funk is coming from.
Yeah. Like what's causing the feelings.
Or understand, be nice to your humans.
Exactly.
And understanding too, especially the person that you choose to call or spend time with or reach out to when you're in a funk are generally the people that you can call when you're having a bad day. Someone that creates a safe space for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think that part of that honoring of the safe space that our friends or family create for us is enough to have that self-awareness of, oh, I'm being a dick.
Yeah.
That's not meant towards you. I've been talking mean to myself and that's what's coming out right now. And being able to, and maybe you realize it later.
Yeah.
Like we often do with our partners. Sorry, guys. But just having that as well. No, I think that's a really good point.
Sometimes it would come from a place of like envy. I would see other people doing these things and I'd be like, well, I'm mad that I can't do that. And then I'd be like, well, that's probably stupid anyways. And you know what I mean? Taking that time to be like, good for them.
You're actually just jealous.
Yeah, I'm actually just being a turd, you know? But again, that usually stems from something else making me unhappy. It's not just I look at something and I'm like, meh.
There's something underneath it.
There's always something underneath of it.
We're delving into therapy things here. This is good. Oh man. Okay, so next tip, move your body. So we're keeping each of these tips pretty broad and then letting you as the listener fill in the blank for what makes the most sense to you. Mm-hmm. So my thought process in moving your body, there is research to say that moving your body helps your brain to start processing things. Bonus points if that moving your body puts you outside. Being outside in nature also helps our mental health. So in this vein, let's think about the lowest barrier to entry.
And I love that you pointed that out because that has been my motto for like the last
for this season with your hand.
Yeah. Even today, I posted on my Instagram, I was like on my little stupid mile walk that I make myself do every day, even if it's raining, because I just need to get out and be off my phone, allow myself that one thing that I do every day. Again, it seems like such a low barrier when you're used to working out so hard.
It's self-care.
Yeah.
It's movement. It's going to help your mental health as well as your physical health.
And I get to hang out with Mabel and she's like the best. So,
but the lowest barrier to entry means how do you get one tiny action? What is one bit of action that you can take to move your body? And maybe it's a walk. Maybe it's putting on your favorite early 2000s playlist and dancing in your kitchen or your living room.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be good dance moves. Find something that like speaks to your soul.
That's how I get myself to clean the kitchen. I just put something on that I like. And then before I know it, the entire thing's clean. And then I'm like, wow.
The music that you choose, is this like you'd be embarrassed to tell the people on the podcast what it is?
Oh, I listen to literally everything.
Or is this okay? I have mixed feels. So I listen to early 2000s rock usually when I'm running or lifting.
Yeah. And
it's all the stuff that I listened to in high school. That's what I always revert back to for whatever reason. And I realized one of my playlists the other day has Nickelback on it.
I don't know when we decided to hate them, but I mean, like,
it's controversial, okay?
Yeah,
it
a lot of their stuff is like, but they got some bangers.
100%. Are we gonna lose listeners or gain listeners with this statement?
Sometimes
right now?
I put it on just to make Brandon angry
because he probably doesn't.
Oh, he's so picky with music.
I guess my whole point in asking music wise is because I'm at this point in life a firm believer that no musical taste should be closeted on the music you love. And so I'm just here to say I love Nickelback for all my runs and workouts. And Fall Out Boy. Okay. For the last 10 years, Spotify has told me I'm in the top 0.5% of listeners of Fall Out Boy. So there we are.
There is like a Newfound Glory album that like no matter where I'm at, what I'm doing, if one song comes on from it, it's like you just start thinking about like memories. You're like, no, I just gotta listen to the whole thing now. Whole album.
In order, because that's how I listened to it when I was on a CD. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But going back to moving your body, find the movement that you enjoy. If we're talking about getting serious with some level of exercise, but this is just movement in general. For Blake and I, even in this season of not having as great of a half marathon training plan, lifting has been not as consistent as I'd like. Our non-negotiable is we take a walk with the dogs every evening, and that's our time to move our bodies. It helps my brain every time because there are times when I get super anxious and getting out for that walk. And we have on the weekends, we walk the dogs in later mornings. And that 1.5 mile walk is our time to reconnect with each other and chat and have a conversation. But it's also just such a good reset. And that's not to say that go for a walk, it's going to fix your funk.
Oh, yeah, absolutely not.
This gets things moving.
Yeah. And it sounds silly, but when I first started doing it, again, as someone who's pretty active, I was like, that's a stupid small accomplishment. But then the more that I did it, the more I felt good once I just completed it.
Yeah.
And then like I even like put them on my Strava so that at the end of the week I can see that I have walked all my miles. For the most part,
I'm proud of you. Gold stars.
Yeah, gold stars. The other day I walked 4 miles.
I love it. Okay, next tip, take good care of you. So again, super broad, but picking one piece of self-care and focusing on that each week. Give yourself a little bit of homework, if you will. Can you dial in your sleep hygiene and aim to get at least 7 hours a night? Can you look at that sleep hygiene routine of, is my room dark? Is my room a certain temperature? When am I turning off my phone or my screens before you get into bed? Having that sleep hygiene routine. Can you look at adding in foods that nourish your body, lessening the amount of time that you doom scroll? I'm speaking to myself here, really.
Yeah, I know.
Pick one thing that makes you happy and then do that. This goes back to that taking tiny action. I know too that when we get in these times of funks and more negative mindset, it's hard to think about what things make you happy. Sometimes you're like, nothing really makes me happy right now. I'm not really sure what activities or things. So maybe thinking happy is too big. If we think about glimmers, going back to our dog walks last weekend, we're walking the dogs and we had everything from sun to wind to rain to a little bit of hail to sun with pouring rain. But when the sun came out after it had poured rain, you're like, oh, it's like a little glimmer of sunshine, little glimmer of happiness. And that's what we're talking about here. Is I'm not saying go find everything that makes you happy. It's just more, sometimes for me, these funks come during a busy season of like work stuff going on, personal stuff going on, family stuff going on. Maybe I have a goal that I'm pursuing and I'm being really relentless about the goal and I put my blinders on and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, there's more of a world out there. Those are usually the times when I'm just kind of like veered so far over and I'm like, when's the last time I did something that made me happy?
Yeah.
What do I enjoy? When's the last time I've done something for fun? And that's our point here of looking at those different pieces of self-care. Another thing to think about as a weekly homework piece is how are you managing stress? But also too, I'm trying to think of a good preface here because I want to throw this out there as a self-care piece, and that's looking at mindfulness and looking at breathing. So mindfulness is super broad, but literally the definition is bringing attention to your thoughts, bringing yourself back to the present. And that goes back to us talking about writing it out, acknowledging our feels, those pieces.
Yeah.
That's all mindfulness is. I'm not saying necessarily meditation, which can be super beneficial, but do we have pointed times to check in with ourselves? But then also along the lines of breathing, which is something I've been really nerding out on recently between exercise performance as well as like working in dentistry. But I'm curious for you listeners, if you've ever noticed if you breathe through your mouth or your nose more, because there are actual health benefits that come from more focused nasal breathing versus mouth breathing from a stress management standpoint.
Yeah.
So just a curiosity piece. And if you've never paid attention, it's something that's pretty cool to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Working in the dental field, there are oftentimes with patients that I'm like, you breathe more through your mouth than your nose, I can tell. So just those things. Yeah, that is my thoughts on self-care and just taking good care of you.
Yeah.
It's finding activities that maybe help you feel more like yourself.
Every time I have a therapy session, that's like the first question that I get asked. And it's the last question I get asked. What did you do to take care of yourself? What thoughts are coming up? And then again, it always ends with, what can we do in the next 2 weeks
to take care of yourself?
Sometimes you overlook it. And I think it's easy to just kind of brush it off as it doesn't really mean anything. It's fine. But I think it is an important piece to actually focus on.
When it's such low hanging fruit, really easy to do, easy to accomplish, like you talking about going for walks, those things of self-care, like, oh yeah, whatever. They make such a big difference. All those little things add up. They really do. They're worth doing, even down to just like nerding out on breathing stuff. How we breathe is important too. And it's like, oh, that's too easy. One last thing about this whole section on self-care and picking one thing a week for your homework here is we titled it Take Good Care of You, because I had a guy I dated well over a decade ago, and he gave me this sunshine yellow notebook and wrote a little note with it. And he said something probably sweet and kind, but I remember the last part was in all caps and it said, above all else, take good care of you. And at the time, I was working full time, going to school full time, training for a marathon, rock climbing, probably dating, well, obviously dating, and had so many things going on. I was such a doer that the thought of self-reflection, now I've journaled in the most basic sense since probably 5th grade, but take good care of me. I'm like, I eat well, I exercise, I'm growing my brain by going back to school, I pay all my bills on time, I'm taking care of me. And what he meant was take care of your internal world. And at the time for me, I was like, I don't know what that means. And only in my later years, and I don't remember, I'd misplaced that notebook. And then it was not until I moved in with Blake that I came across it with the note still taped to it. And I was like, oh, I know what that means now.
I've come so far.
This took a few years. Yeah. So anyways, okay, last tip, reflect on your values. We've talked about values on the podcast numerous times. And the first time that we talked about values on the podcast, Megan was like, oh my God, this reminds me of corporate America.
What's our mission statement?
I think that talking about values tends to get dismissed again as another thing that's like, oh yeah, whatever, I have values.
Yeah.
Okay, but have you thought about them? Could you tell me right now what they are? How many do you have? Is that too many?
Even the first time that we actually had talked about it, it was kind of a hard question for me to answer. So I was like, well, what do you mean?
You gave me this list of 100 different values and I have to pick 2. So shameless plug for episode 9 of the podcast is on core values. There is a core values worksheet download to help you brainstorm. And the cool thing about values is your core values can change. They should change. Your seasons of life change. And so if we can have those values in mind, oftentimes for me, my funks come from deviating too far away from what those values are. Deviating too far away from, sounds super broad, but like my purpose. And you don't have to have a purpose figured out, but that overarching theme of like, when's the last time I did something to take care of myself? When's the last time I did something to take care of others? And coming back to that. And it's cheesy. I feel cheesy talking about these things because they can be so easily dismissed. But like for right now, in this season, my core values are play and connection. And I mean, a couple weeks ago, I was just feeling like I was super funky, right? Just kind of in that. And I was reflecting back and I was journaling before bed and I'm like, well, when's the last time you played? That's something you really wanted to hone in on.
Yeah.
So the next day it was like, how can I make things fun? How can I play? And coming back to that, or valuing connection and seeing that connection play out with how much Sturdy Girl has grown and connecting with other people on these topics and being able to start a conversation, connecting with friends, with family. We had so much family time last month and focusing on those things.
Yeah.
Those can often help out a lot.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts on values. It reminds me, and I hesitate adding this in here because I did not do my due diligence of research, but I was thinking about Viktor Frankl, who wrote a couple different books, survived concentration camps, and he coined a term called logotherapy. And he talks about having a purpose and our own internal purpose being our internal compass, essentially. Yeah. And that's basically what this is about. Is when we have a sense of self and a sense of purpose, it allows us to move through the world a little bit easier. And so that's kind of the whole point of this.
I love it.
Was that time number 3 of kind of? I'm counting. Wow. They're doing good. Okay.
Won't even need to edit them out.
We're going to keep them. Audience is counting. So those are your 5 tips for getting yourself out of a funk. It's not going to solve it. There's usually no way to solve it beyond the passage of time. Sometimes they solve themselves, but these are ways to say, check in with yourself, take care of yourself, don't isolate yourself, and remember who the hell you are. Because maybe you're not a little bitch, like my runner brain says, but maybe you're a bad bitch, and you got to remind yourself of that. So 5 tips. Write it out. Journal, voice memo, notes app. Acknowledging those feels. Call a friend. Get coffee with a friend. Go for a walk with a friend. 3rd, move your body. Think about that lowest barrier to entry. Is it a walk? Is it, for me, when a long run feels, or a run, I should say, any kind of run feels overwhelming, I just get on the treadmill. And I tell myself, you're going to lace up your shoes, you're going to get on the treadmill, and you're going to walk for 5 minutes. And usually by that point, I'm like, all right, let's go. Or if it's pushing myself a little bit more, it's, all right, you're going to run for 1 mile. And you get to that 1 mile mark and you can keep going. But tiny actions. And maybe your tiniest of actions, if you are way out of the habit of going to the gym and working out and exercising, maybe the smallest habit is to start putting on your workout clothes. We talked about this in a previous episode. Yeah. Maybe your smallest action, your lowest barrier to entry is stepping into the gym, right? Working through those things. But moving your body is so important for us to start processing the feels. Dance it out. Tell us what your favorite music to listen to is. We want to know.
Spotify playlist coming up.
Sturdy Girl Spotify playlist?
Oh, I feel like our tastes would be so much different. It would intersect a lot and it would cross, but
it would be fantastic.
There would be spectrums.
And that we would get just a broad range of listeners. Be good.
Yeah.
4th tip, take good care of you. Pick one piece of self-care, one piece of something to take care of you. Sleep hygiene, nourishing your body, lessening the amount you doom scroll, stress management, tiny glimmers. Focus on those things. How are you breathing? Are you breathing through your mouth or your nose, right?
I won't judge you if you breathe through your mouth.
There is no judgment on this podcast.
I'm just kidding. I have to keep throwing that in because I can't breathe out of my nose. Again, I'm very envious of all you wonderful nose breathers.
Wasn't there something in Stranger Things about being a mouth breather and that was an insult? Is to call someone a mouth breather.
Yeah, it's been
a hot second. I was trying to remember. Anyways, last tip recap here is reflect on your values. Go back and listen to episode 9 if you haven't. Use your core values download and pick out your core values. Remind yourself of those. Lastly, we've talked motivation a few different times throughout this episode. Yeah. You can't rely on motivation to keep yourself going. Action comes before motivation to start giving yourself that momentum to keep going. So there you go. Get out of your funky town.
Well, you make it sound so fun. Funky town.
No, you want to get out of it. Have a better kind of funky town that's like dancing and glimmers and happy and gold stars for self-care. Yeah, that's our goal. All right, friends. Season 2 has been so much fun. The launch of our apparel was amazing. We're working on Mother's Day shirts right now.
Aww.
I'm really excited. We just got the first concept back today. So working on that. We're going to take a little break for a few weeks, and then we'll be back. We'll miss you while we're gone. But in the meantime, your continued reviews and ratings on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, all the things mean the world to us. I've enjoyed reading them. I've gotten a few emails of your screenshots of reviews. Love reading them. You have a little something in the mail coming to you, so there you are. If you haven't left a review, we would love it. We read them all. We love them all. It helps us grow this thing and helps us further the mission of Sturdy Girl to get you focused on moving your attention away from your appearance and on to living your big rad life. That's what we're all about. Happy end of season 2, friends. We will talk to you in a few weeks.
Bye.